So first of all, a very big welcome to the ESME course. And we really want to do our best to make sure that you find it useful and practical. I mean, when I first thought about the ESME course and designed it, and the book Essential Skills was written as a text for it, the aim was to have a practical course. There's so many courses in medical education that either concentrate on the theory or the more esoteric aspects of the subject. And I wanted this to be a practical course and a practical book that was relevant to every teacher, whatever their responsibilities were, and whether they were new to teaching or had been teaching for many years and just wanted a quick update. So it was meant as very much as a practical guide to teaching. And I think the first module talks about how important this is, and how the most important role that we have is as a teacher, and how we're key players, and whether some of these new developments, whether it's simulation or new technologies or augmented reality or the latest approach to programmatic assessment, whether these work or not in practice actually depends on our role as teachers. We are the secret ingredient that it makes it a success. And that's why I started almost the first module saying that of all the things that are most important in the course, it's not so much the curriculum. And I think it was just about 80 years ago, Sir Derek Dunlop, who was a very famous physician in Scotland, he was the physician to the Queen, and wrote in the Scottish Medical Journal at that time on an issue about the future of medical education, that while the curriculum matters a lot, even more important, if you've got good teachers and good students, that's even more important. So it's so I think the fact that we're taking some time to think about how we're teaching is excellent. So a big welcome to everyone to this course, and we do hope you find it both useful but also enjoyable. You know, I always think that education, medical education, should be fun as well. There's a lot of excitement in it, a lot of passion, and the best teachers, as I described in that first module, are those who've got a passion and for the subject, and are not seen by the students as just doing it because it's some sort of chore. So a very big welcome, and thank you for joining the course, and thank you for joining the session. These sessions, which we'll do as part of each of the modules, are really very informal, and you're invited to, if you have any suggestions for questions you want to raise in advance, and we've got three here that people have sent in. We'll use these as the basis for the discussion. But again, please, these are very informal sessions. Don't worry about interrupting, or if you've got a different view or something that's not clear. That's the aim of this session. It's a chance to talk about the issues, to disagree, to agree, and to get things clarified where you feel that would be helpful. So they're very informal sessions. I don't know whether we should go around everyone. Should we just quickly go around and say, although we won't do this every time, but just this time, is it pronounced? Sorry if I get the names pronounced wrong. Is it Ricky? Yeah,
Yeah, it's me.
And you're from Denmark?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what's your specialty there? What are you doing in Denmark?
I'm an anesthesiologist. I'm also a course leader in the large simulation center. I think it's the largest simulation center in Denmark, where I have worked with simulation and education for many years, both undergraduate and graduate, but now mostly postgraduate learning.
Yeah.
I have some good mentors in this field. They have learned me something and practice quite a lot of practice in this field, but I need the theoretical models and together with all the practice I'm doing. So,
well, we hope that delivers. There's obviously a lot of interest in anesthetics in education. It's interesting. You probably know Charlotte Ringstead, of course.
I know Charlotte Ringsted and Doris Østergaard. Yeah, a lot.
And there's a huge amount of work on that and simulation coming from Denmark. So it's
Yeah, yeah.
so a big welcome.
Thank you.
I'm just going across at my own screen here. Marwa, who is here as one of our facilitators and tours. Marwa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, Professor Harden. Hello, Joe. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here again. It's always very interesting to join the live sessions of the ESME course. Yeah, my name is Marwa, and I've been a tutor in ESME this is my fourth year, starting my fourth year. And I did my PhD in medical education in Germany and the master's in medical education in Dundee, where I met Professor Harden for the first time.
And you're now in Egypt.
I'm back in Germany. I'm between.
You're back in Germany now, right?
Yes,
right.
I'm between both countries.
Right. Excellent. Carmen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carmen Pleșeanu. I'm from Romania. I'm a cardiologist, and I'm passionate about medical education. I teach fourth-year students at bedside, but also trainees in cardiology and other specialties that have cardiology in their curriculum.
Excellent. That's great. My own background was in endocrinology, not cardiology, but I had quite a lot of good friends who were cardiologists, and I did a lot of work in the simulation side with the Miami group, who were a group of key cardiologists who had really developed the Harvey cardiac simulator.
It's great. We have one of those, and you know that the hormone, the thyroid hormones, beat the heart and make it go faster. So you're
there we are. Quite right. Quite exciting times. And Yinder, is it? Yep. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi. So my name is Dr. Baljinder Singh. I'm from UAE, Dubai. I'm an ER physician, and I work as an education coordinator in our hospital. And I'm also responsible for the training of the fourth-year medical students as well as the interns. I have special interest in training, teaching, and recently I've joined as a trainer of the trainers for the first aid from the Red Cross. And I'm really excited to be a part of this group and learn more and how to improve myself, becoming a better teacher.
Excellent. That's great. There's a lot of interest there as well in medical education. It's huge opportunities. So that's marvelous. And the UAE, I've still fond memories. I was on the transitional council for the one of the earlier medical schools in Al Ain in the UAE.
Okay.
And so that was Sheikh Nayan, I remember, was the vice chancellor, and I was very impressed with his vision for medical education in the Emirates in the UAE. So it was great. And there was a recent conference, of course, that Hossam Hamdi ran. I gave a plenary talk at it on quality assurance. So there's a lot of things happening in your part of the world. So great that you're part of it, and hope we'll continue to lead it, some of it. So great.
I'm from the same university from Dr. Hamdi, Professor Hamdi from the Gulf Medical University.
Yes, right.
Yes, I've done my master's in health education under him and from FIMA recently in 2020.
Sure. Well, we look forward to your contribution to the course and to sharing your own views and thoughts with us. So that's great.
Thank you.
And Adonis, is it Adonis?
Yes, yes, that's right. So my name is Adonis Wazir. I'm from Lebanon, but I'm currently in London. I was actually born in Al Ain, so when you mentioned it, it always, reminds me of where I grew up. And it's always good to see that they've been developing medical education as well there. So I'm a junior doctor at the moment. I'm not practicing, but I am in process of getting my registration here in the UK. And I'm interested in pursuing a specialty in emergency medicine as well.
Yeah.
Big fan of medical education, and I just wanted to thank you, Professor Harden. I think it's really great that you're taking the time to sit and meet with the learners here rather than just posting a recorded video. It's really great to see.
Well, no, thank you for that comment, and I really would have loved to have done it live rather than recording. But anyway, we are here anyway, and we can discuss it. And it's great to hear and your contribution. It's interesting, junior doctor, one of the themes we're just looking at the moment at the abstracts for the ESME conference, we got about 3,000 abstracts submitted. And this year, for the first time, we'll be back to we hope, a face-to-face real meeting and a real conference, rather than we've had to do for the last 2 years, a virtual conference. And so we're looking at the abstracts at the moment for that. And it was interesting the last couple of years, and this year as well, there's one of the sessions on the junior doctor as a teacher. And it's obviously on people's agenda that the junior doctor there in the past, the idea has been so busy with service commitments that was his only role. But the notion that he's there as a teacher, not just of his colleagues himself, but also of his students, is very much on the agenda. So it's great that you're with us, and we look forward to getting your own perspectives, because many of these principles we're talking about, I hope that one can translate these into these very different scenes in which we're working, whether it's undergraduate education in the basic scientists, or the later years of the clinicians, or into postgraduate or even CPD. And I've always interested, one of the things we'll be talking later about my FAIR model for how everyone can be a more effective teacher by being fair to students, giving feedback, activity, individualization, relevance, one of the themes we'll be talking about later. And what I'm always interested in is the number of different ways in terms of the assignments that the participants pick up on this and apply it to that same principles in their own setting. Because I think if something is a good test, is a model, a principle, or a technique works, and we'll talk about that in the OSCE later as well. When one of the things that gave me a lot of satisfaction when the police force in the UK took up the OSCE as their national exam for the police force, and it makes me think that if something can be worked in another context, or whether a different profession or a different stage of the training, or even a different geographical context, then it's a good test. Is there something in that model? So I think it's interesting we should keep asking ourselves about the model. So again, thank you for joining us. And now I'm more difficult with this pronunciation. Ponund Hai, please tell me.
Hello, sir. My name is Dr. Ponnudali.
Ponnudali.
Yes, sir. Ponnudali.
Yeah. And would you try to introduce yourself?
Sir, I am a professor and HOD of Department of Biochemistry in our medical college, Vinayaga Missions Medical College in Tamil Nadu. And I have a passion for medical education. And we have just started implementing CBME curriculum for the past 2 years. So we are facing a lot of challenges. And I'm a subcurricular committee member for the phase 1, sir. And I very much look forward to this session with you, sir. I've always admired you, and your writings. I've gone through your articles, and I'm really looking forward to this session.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. And I've been very impressed that in India, they've taken on board this CBEME, community-based medical education, as a national policy, and it's great that that's. And when we get some of your input and get you come back in a few moments and tell us about it, both the upside and on the downside. Maybe even one of the questions came from you. Not sure, but we'll get your views on this later. But that's marvelous. It's a little while since I've been in India, but I've always enjoyed and found very passionate some of the people there about the education process. So, and Muhammad?
Sir, Muhammad Ali Rajput.
Yeah. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Sir, hello, sir. Good evening. This is Dr. Muhammad Ali, and I'm from Pakistan. I've done, sir, PhD in pharmacology and currently serving in one of the medical colleges of Pakistan. Sir, I'm your big fan. You are my mentor, and you are the one who have inculcated the interest of this health professions education in me. And sir, I am currently doing ESME Flexi course, and your videos are marvelous. I'm learning a lot, sir. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your kind comments. And again, I've been impressed with the enthusiasm for people from Pakistan. It's a wee while since I've been in Pakistan, although I've taken part recently in the last couple of years in some virtual conferences, but it's not the same convection of enthusiasm at a distance, but whatever, nice. And Siva?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Siva. I'm a GI surgeon. I am interested in medical teaching, and I'm the lead for quality in our hospital. I completed the certificate course from Feimer Kiel in health professions education, but having read your book, I think
Oh, that's good. Read the book there. That's very good publicity. Excellent.
I've underlined each and every line, and literally I'm just trying to. So I thought I was just looking forward for this course so that I get the practical aspect, and so I listen from the master himself. Yeah.
Where are you based now?
Yeah, I'm based in a place called Tirupati in South India. Though I don't teach the undergraduates, but I teach the GI. I mean, it's a subspecialty. Basically, what I thought was they will be the teachers for the future. So in a way, I thought I can at least apply all these principles in
Yeah. Excellent. No, and it's nice to have a surgeon with us as well. One of the themes running through last year's ESME conference was surgery education, and we had a great group of surgeons. Sach Deva who's I think president of the American College of Surgeons, and really surgeons, key surgeon from around the world. He's got involved with his working group looking at the program of surgery education as a track through the ESME conference in Lyon. And I must say I've been hugely impressed by their dedication to the medical education. And I think there's a lot of interest now in surgery and some of the important issues being raised. So it's great. So we'll hear a lot more about surgery education, I'm sure. So thank you also for joining us. Maha, are you next to tell us about yourself?
Hello, Dr. Harden. I am Maha Farid. I am a faculty member in the College of Medicine in the Department of Forensic Medicine and Clinical Toxicology in Helwan University in Egypt. I have a PhD in environmental health and toxicology from the University of Nebraska in USA. Now I'm responsible for the faculty development program for medical education in Helwan University. I'm also the vice president for the IT unit at the same institution. It's nice
Excellent.
to be here.
And you said Egypt, did you? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. No, there's obviously a lot of interest. A couple of years ago, I was in Egypt, and again impressed with the enthusiasm, and the government is trying to obviously update or upgrade medical education, and there's a lot of interest. And in fact, there's two later the next couple of months. I think two conferences I think they're virtual conference. I've been invited to speak at them in Egypt. So there's a lot obviously happening in medical education in Egypt. So great that you're joining and can share your own views with us as well. And tell us a little bit what's happening in Egypt at the same time.
Yes, I will be glad to. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Sean.
I think Sean is currently in another meeting while he's keeping an eye on this as well.
Right,
he's multitasking.
Okay, excellent. That's good. Excellent. Wadan then?
And Wada has a poor internet connection just now, so he has posted in the chat and said hello to everybody, so that'll be posted later.
Anyway, so glad I thought it'd be interesting just to get these stories, and I think what is impressive, even this group, is the range of different expertise and background experiences they'll bring to the discussions from either different specialties, from basic scientists up to clinicians, those interested in postgraduate education, and different geographical backgrounds and different subject areas. So it's a huge range of input, and I sometimes think in the courses just as much is to be gained from each other sharing our experiences as from any more formal sessions. So let's go on with our talking in this session about these modules you've been looking at so far. So again, a big welcome to everyone, and please do it as this session goes on. Please do interrupt. Have I missed out everyone? Or Joe, has everyone had a chance to introduce themselves? Yep.
I think so.
Yep, right. Excellent. The couple of comments came in that asked that we suggested we might talk a little bit about in terms of outcome-based education, and I think looking at the 6 modules in the course, the one I don't know whether I should say this or not, but the one that people seem to struggle most with is this one on outcome-based education, which is I always find interesting because the premise behind it is so important and in some ways so simple, and yet when we look at applying it, it becomes more difficult. I remember 2 of the previous course participants who were saying, look, they were relatively newly qualified, and were saying, look, our school had an outcome-based model, but we couldn't understand, how could you not have it? How could you have an education program? How could you have education where you didn't specify the learning outcomes in advance? I mean, how is that possible? They asked, and they said, "Well, that is the kind of traditional approach. Almost, it's discovered over time. It's a sort of, as I've said, a magical mystery tour you go through, learning what you need to learn as you go along it. But it's so the premise is, I think, it's a very obvious one, and we've got, in fact, coming back to the ESME conference in Lyon in August this year, Bill Spady, who's the kind of father figure of outcome-based education, is going to be a plenary speaker both at the Ottawa conference and the ESME conference. And one of his themes was, how can you assess anyone? How can you assess anyone if you don't know what you should be assessing? And that will be the theme of his conference, of his presentation. So it's such an obvious issue, but it does, however, in practice, raise a number of problems. One of the issues that was raised by someone, I don't know, maybe someone here, and please do come in, and I'll pause in a few moments and get your thoughts on it as well, was to what extent are the outcomes generalizable across different cultures and different specialties and different areas? Can you specify outcomes that avoid that? And I think it's an interesting question. And 2 things, just 2 anecdotes to tell you that suggest that yes, you can. I think one of them was quite a powerful one. The New York China Medical Board, which I was on for a number of years, was given the task of, in China, trying to implement the OSCE. That's why I was involved a little, and also implement learning outcomes. And with some discussion, what sort of outcomes could you develop outcomes for education for these students, undergraduate, postgraduates in China? Would it not be very different from those in the USA? And those involved with the initiative in China said, look, we don't want just to train doctors who are specific for China. We want doctors who are going to be practicing in this world. You may go even to the States sometime to practice. They may stay in China. They may come even to the UK. But we want these as global citizens, global doctors. And we want outcomes that will reflect that. And based on that, Wojciech was given the task of developing an outcome-based approach that mirrored that philosophy, and it became the Global Minimum Education Requirements, GMER, the Global Minimum Education Requirements. And I've given the reference and some more about it in the book, if you want to look at it in the section Outcome-Based Education. And this was an attempt to look at these outcomes and a framework for outcomes that could be applicable anywhere in the world and at any stage in education. And I think why it does that is that, and it's not dissimilar from the three-circle model of the Scottish doctor, that where we've got these different domains, and the ACGME abilities, or the CanMed's abilities, it's not dissimilar to these where you've got a set of domains, and for example, communication skills, history taking, physical examination, patient management, problem solving, some of these general domains that if you look at all these different frameworks, and I think one doesn't want to push any one framework. Obviously, I found there's a lot of attraction in the Scottish Doctor one, which was the three-circle model we first used in Dundee. It's part of these domains. And the idea is that these domains, I think if one looks at them, they can be applied really in anywhere internationally. And people may take these and just develop them further in their own situation. But these broad domains are international. Wherever you're practicing, communication skills are really important. You may define how they should be applied, but it's an important attribute, an important competence, an important learning outcome, in the same way that physical examination, practical procedures, what practical procedures should one expect the person to be able to undertake. So these general domains, I think one can specify them in more detail, but they're generalizable, and that was the aim of that, setting these global minimum education requirements in the China Medical Board. But more closer at home, the Scottish Doctor, how it came about was writing these domains there in that three-circle model was Ken Kalman, who was the chief medical officer, and I think I mentioned that in the recording, the chief medical officer in Scotland, who was responsible for the hospitals, and said, look, I really want to be assured that these young doctors qualifying for medical school, coming into my hospitals, I have a responsibility, because they'll be practicing treating my patients in the hospitals, that what competencies do they have? And there's all these 5 different schools in Scotland, yet there should be some basic competencies, whether the person's coming as a student, a graduate from Dundee or from Aberdeen or St Andrews or Glasgow or Edinburgh, wherever they're coming from, then there's I want to be assured they've got these basic competencies. So the deans got together, and for the first time, he said, for the first time ever almost, the Scottish deans agreed on something, and it was agreed what these general competencies were. Now, of course, the details can matter, and they can be different. Research, for example, featured a bit more in the Edinburgh outcomes. In Dundee, it was a rather different approach as well. So there may be slightly different variations in terms of what skills do you expect the person to have. But these general domains are really transferable, and can be applied really internationally. And I think it's important to pick a format that is helpful in letting one in one's own situation develop them in more detail. I think that's what happened in Saudi Arabia. They chose some of these general frameworks and then adapted it to fit in their own area. But if you look at the end result, the general competencies are very similar in all of these frameworks. Now, I've done too much talking already. Could we get some comments on that? And what did someone actually raise that question when we were talking earlier? Would somebody like to come in and comment? Mara, maybe you want to start while people are thinking what they want to come in. Mara, would you want to comment from your perspective on this issue of the generalizability and the generalized applicability of the learning outcome framework?
Yes, they are, because I did my PhD in migration of doctors and the global doctor. Doctors migrate from one country to another, and not only from poor to rich countries, but also from Germany to the UK, and from the UK to the USA and to Australia. So doctors migrate, patients migrate, diseases migrate, like we saw in the pandemic. So the competency framework and the outcomes could also be adopted in different countries. And it was actually adopted, like you said, in Saudi Arabia. They adopted the CAN meds and made the Saudi meds out of them. In Egypt, the framework, the competency framework for the undergraduate education was inspired by the Tomorrow's Doctors framework in the UK. So experience has shown that it was a successful adoption of competency framework outcomes across the globe. And I think some people may argue because diseases and health priorities are different in different countries, but we're not, because people say we should tailor the curriculum based on the needs of the population and the priority health problems in that specific country. But this is not against exporting or importing outcomes, because outcomes are, like you said, attributes of the graduate. They should be able to communicate, they should be able to be safe doctors. And being safe doctors has very little to do with the content of the curriculum. It's more about what the doctor is able to do and how they do it that matters. So yes, they are generalizable, of course.
Would anyone like to come in and actually disagree or agree or add to that discussion that we've been having about the generalizability of outcomes?
About the outcomes, I think for a school, for a medical education, now undergraduates MBBS education, I think the outcomes can be the same, whether a young doctor is able to take an efficient history, whether he or she is able to perform a good medical examination, whether they are able to do some basic skills of surgical skills or orthopedic skills. And the purpose of a medical school, I think, is that when the MBBS student graduates, he or she should be able to practice independently without supervision. Now, usually what happens is students go ahead with their year 1, 2, 3. They have certain requirements. If they get 60% or 50% or 70% as per the requirement, and they will pass their OSCE examinations, they'll pass their MCQ examinations. But when it comes to internship and it's time for them to practice, sometimes they are not able to do that. So once we have outcomes-based education, then we will assess them based on these skills, whether they are able to counsel patients, whether they're able to counsel the families, whether they're able to take consents from the patients, and whether they're able to think like what investigations they should order, what kind of procedures they should be able to advise and do. So I think it is very important that we train students who are able to become independent, unsupervised doctors, junior doctors, and then from there on, take their own education into their hands and think which specialty they want to train in. So I think outcome-based education is the right way to go.
Sure. So that's a good point, and we'll come back later and talk more about this when we come to the curriculum, about the notion of a core curriculum and what that is, and what we're expecting students, what's the exit learning outcomes that the students should have when they leave a medical school. Sir Ken Coleman's really challenge to the deans in Scotland. You tell me, what is the exit learning outcomes? But given that, I think it's also coming from your comments that the challenge is for each specialty, whether it's anesthetics or whether it's basic sciences or cardiology, whatever, to say, how is my course contributing to these exit learning outcomes? And I think that changes the whole dynamic of the education. I remember, and I think maybe I've told this story in the recording, but I'll repeat it again because I think it was quite a powerful one. Peter Howie, who was the professor of obstetrics and gynecology in Dundee, was challenged at the curriculum committee because before there was a significant element of obstetrics, but it was suggested that really now in the UK, such of that level of competence that was previously expected is no longer required if you're practicing in the UK now. One may agree or disagree with that, but the challenge was, do we need so much clinical attachments in obstetrics, an 8-week clerkship in obstetrics, when that is, a lot of that would happen after postgraduate training. And so can we cut down that clerkship? And there are plenty of other people who wanted longer clerkships in their area, whether it was in palliative care or whatever. And he came back and said, look, what my obstetrics curriculum and training program is achieving is not just these practical skills you've been talking about in obstetrics and delivery of children, but in other ways as well. He said, what I'm giving, one of the outcomes in the Scottish Doctor is health promotion and disease prevention. Health promotion, disease prevention. Now, where better can the students learn about health promotion and disease prevention than in my antenatal clinics? And the reason to spend more time in antenatal clinics, because that's all about, that's health promotion, disease prevention in practice. So that is a key. I'm contributing to one of your most important outcomes. Also, in self-assessment, in audit, we've got a very good, students see very good auditing of what happens in pregnancy, the effect on the child and the mother, what are the outcomes, and we audit these. So looking at self-assessment audit, critical thinking is very much, so we're doing a lot of things other than just simply the practical skills of delivering a baby. And the committee said, you're absolutely, we agree with you. Please keep the 8 weeks clerkship and continue doing what you're doing. So it's, I think it is an interesting challenge. If I could just one other example, I think another example I gave on the basic sciences, the professor at an EPMEC, Asian Pacific Medical Education Conference a number of years ago, which was on the subject of outcome-based education, the professor of anatomy at the Mayo Clinic said, what is expected of me as a teacher of anatomy, as a head of the teaching of anatomy in the Mayo Clinic? Now, he said, if you'd asked me this a number of years ago, I would have said to teach the students anatomy. That's what else do you think a professor of anatomy is about? I've got all this knowledge of anatomy. My job is to transfer it to the students. But he said this whole business of outcome-based education made me rethink. And I've got other commitments. And we can also contribute in many ways to these exit learning outcomes. So that even for these first-year medical students, we talk about communication skills. They're acquiring team-working skills, problem-based learning, problem-solving skills. So we're contributing more than just the knowledge of anatomy. So I think the challenge with an outcome-based model is for everyone in their own, whatever course that you're running, and this sort of applies to myself in the endocrinology course as well. What is my aim of the endocrinology course is not just to teach students endocrinology, but what other outcomes do I have? So I think it's an interesting, for me, that is the kind of the biggest challenge. And sometimes people lose sight of that in terms of thinking of outcome-based education.
I think Maha would like to come in.
Yeah, please, Maha, please come in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harden, for this. I would like to add one of the challenges of having a global outcome-based curriculum is the different hierarchy of medical personnel in different countries. So from my experience, I've been in the States, for example, I would go to an obstetric or OBGYN, and they would refer me to someone to do for ultrasound. While in Egypt, for example, the OBGYN specialist is the one who does this. So when we talk about having different job description for a graduate, because there are other complementary staff around him, it's somehow challenging, you know what I mean? But I totally agree with you that public health and health promotion should be part of any curriculum and the outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it really leads also to one of the big challenges we're facing, I think, in medical education is the notion of interprofessional education. We'll talk later about that in the curriculum module. But the challenge is that, look, as doctors, we have to work as members of a team. In fact, if you look where are the most mistakes made, if you look at the medical defense unions, where the most mistakes made in medicine, it's not because of lack of knowledge, usually in the doctor, it's lack of team working skills, communication skills. That we should spend more time thinking about how will people work as a member of a team. And not surprisingly, it doesn't happen as effectively as we'd like. When if the 5-6 years of medical training they learn just within their own specialty as medical students, that we should train them much more as part of that, embedded in the curriculum into professional education. So it's an interesting issue. And coming back to your point about the hierarchy and so on, whatever, it's interesting that if you look at the outcomes and develop these as a curriculum map, and we'll be talking about that. It's one of my pet things that we'll have done much more about. I've always been disappointed there's not been more progress made with mapping the curriculum, drawing a visual map of the curriculum. You're talking UAE and Hossam Hamdi. He was, when he was dean in Sharjah in the UAE. I remember visited his office there, and two of the whole walls of his office were filled with this curriculum map showing what the different learning outcomes were and how they were achieved in the different education courses. And what's interesting if you have a curriculum map is to chart on it, yes, where the medical students should be achieving, what they should be mastering and learning, but also what the other specialists should be, what should the other technologists, what should the nurses, where do they fit into that curriculum? Where's their overlap? It was an interesting way of thinking about these different professions, and also even progression in medicine, what we expect a first-year medical student of this map of these learning outcomes. Communication skills, of course, yes, but in what way is that different from we expect in a second-year medical student, a final-year medical student, a postgraduate? Is it maybe then breaking bad news and somebody's child's died or something? Is that you expect that only later, and in the different specialties? So how, even if you take something like communication, how does people progress through at different stages in education? So I think it is a way of thinking of these issues about seniority, different progressions, what you expect from first-year medical students, what you expect of a specialist in the subject, and what you expect of a nurse and a technologist. So it's an interesting view. Right. Anyone else like to come in that? Yeah.
I think Mohammed would like to come in.
Excellent, please. Thanks for reminding me. Mohammed, do you want to come in?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. As I am representing developing country, that is Pakistan, I have a few challenges, and I have a few questions as well, which I want to ask. Sir, the challenges we have, we can't have a uniform curriculum here, although we have a strong desire that we could have a uniform curriculum. But because, as you said, as you taught us in your book, Essential Skills for a Medical Teacher, that before implementing or developing any curriculum, there should be a teacher's training, which is very important. The teacher's role is more important than curriculum development or curriculum implementation. So we do not have a proper teacher's training over here in developing countries, not just in Pakistan, but in overall. I'm talking about overall, what's happening here in developing countries, in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and so on and so on. Sir, we have inadequate resources. In small group discussions, you told us that students should be using the gadgets, and the Wi-Fi facility should be great. So we have students, everyone has gadgets available, but we do not have Wi-Fi facility. Plus, we have the load shedding issue. We have resources and technology deficiency. We do not have adequate simulations, virtual patients training, and so on and so forth. So, sir, how can we overcome these deficiencies? And because without these, in this era of technology, we cannot achieve the outcomes to their maximum limit. So this is the question, sir. And a few more questions, sir, I will be asking, but as this meeting advances. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no, it's a key issue you're raising. We've been talking about the theoretical position of outcome-based education, but what about its implementation in practice? And it's not easy. And I think that's one of the reasons why people find this module perhaps one of the more difficult modules in the course. The general answer. There's no magical answer to your question, Mohammed. It's a very important and a key question that really at different levels we're all identify with. But I think there's one general approach that apply a number of things, whether it's outcome-based education or curriculum planning or whatever. Go back to an older method, not an older method, but an approach to education that was introduced more than 2 decades ago, that problem-based learning or integrated teaching. And the question often was set up in debates. Are you for or against it? And people would sometimes speak to me at a meeting and say, are you for or against integrated teaching? Or are you for or against problem-based learning? I expect me to, from some unknown wisdom, to give them the magical answer to that question. And I think the same is true of outcome-based education. It's almost, there've been a couple of articles almost written in this controversial, are you for or against outcome-based education? And I think that's not very helpful, particularly to someone like Mohammed who asked that question. I think what one should adopt in all of these areas is a different question. It's the wrong question. It's not, are you for or against it? But where should you be on the continuum? Because I think the answer is not everything should be outcome-based education. Everything should be outcomes for everything, or there should none at all. We should have no idea what we're expecting of the students. When the students come into medical school, we have no idea what they should be achieving after the 6 years in the program. Or we should know exactly, down to great detail, what they're achieving. Both ends of these continuum are unacceptable. They just would work in an approach, and everyone can see that. And when it comes to we'll come back to this in the SPICES model and the curriculum planning. That was why I introduced the SPICES model there. It was saying these 6 continuous, student-centered, teacher-centered, integrated, discipline-based, and so on. These continua, it's getting away from, are you for or against something, but where do you want to be on that continuum? And I think it's the same is true outcome-based education, to challenge our teachers. And that we, of course, we need to discuss it. They need to be motivated, but to challenge them and say, well, if there is a continuum, where do you want to be in that continuum? We can't, you want to have no discussion at all of what we're expecting the students to achieve when they leave our medical school. Would our accreditors, would the public, would the profession go along with that? Of course, the answer is no. There must be some discussion. And yet, remember, we don't want to at the other end of the continuum. So where do we want to be in the continuum? And once you've agreed that, then well, what will we do about it locally to achieve that? So I think that even though it's diverting it for or against the approach, but saying, what are we going to do about the approach, and where can we develop that, and at what level? I think at the more in-depth appreciation, I think the model that I think is most difficult of I think Spady talked, and I described in the book, the kind of 5 basic principles of outcome-based education. I think the 5th one is probably the most difficult to implement in practice. And that is that what should be a model is not a time-dependent model, but an outcome model. It should not be the course specified in hours. It should not be a 6-year, 5-year course, or an 8-week module in cardiology, or whatever it is in anesthetics. It should not be these are a 3-year training program for orthopedic surgeons. It should be specified in what do we expect to achieve, and even at a simpler level in the curriculum, when we send our students, say, in one afternoon a week to the simulation laboratory. Coming back to the Denmark experience, it shouldn't be you're every Wednesday afternoon you have 3 hours in the clinical skills laboratory where you can practice the simulators. It should be how long do you require, what skills are you expected to achieve in that afternoon there in the simulator, whether if it's a cardiac simulator with Harvey or whatever, what do you expect to achieve? And that will depend on how you master the skill, not how long it should be. Bill McGahey in Chicago I think, demonstrated in that respect with simulators that some students learn in about a quarter of the time of others. So instead of saying you should be 1 hour in a simulation laboratory, some students required 4 hours. And that was fine, because what mattered was the skills they acquired and not how long they should be. So that is, I think, probably the more difficult principles to embed into the curriculum. And what do we do? How can we change the whole length of the curriculum? How can we change the length of our modules? Or what can we do about it? And, you know, I think there are ways around that. Increasingly, people are being inventive and finding ways around that. But that is I think, probably the biggest, most difficult challenge in outcome-based education. I just will add one other quick challenge, and then I open it up again for further comments. I think the simpler challenge that we can all do something about is making through that in our schools, that any decisions taken about the curriculum, we ask the simple question, how does that contribute to the learning outcomes of what we expect our doctors to achieve in qualification? And we keep asking that basic question, how does the experiences, if it's a new lecture that's being introduced, if it's a new clinical attachment, if it's a new course in basic sciences or whatever, how does that contribute to the end exit learning outcomes? We can start that discussion going. So it's not easy, this argument. Anyone like to come in further?
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have a piece of a question. Sir, is it competency-based education? So, sir, the question which I was asking related to this, EPAs, Entrustable Professional Activities. Sir, is it implementable in basic sciences subjects as well, or for undergraduate students, or is this activities only for postgraduates?
No, I think we can apply these at different levels, accepting this notion of a progression, that what we expect of students in first year are different from what we expect students in the final year, and whether that's in specifying what learning outcomes we're expecting in terms of communication skills, practice procedures, or whatever, what we're testing in an OSCE. An OSCE for first year students will be different from an OSCE for final year students, or an OSCE in postgraduate education. And it's just what's expected will be different in these different settings.
So, sir, do we have some minimum competency chart to push students into the next stage if they successfully attempt all of the minimum competencies required to push them into the next stage, into the next semester, or into the next module? Should we have, apart from the actual learning outcomes or assessment outcomes, should we have some other thing which we should not have to show it to students, but we have to keep it in our pockets just for assessing students?
Yeah, a great thought. I mean, either we can, if students master the basic outcomes more quickly, they can progress to the next bit of the course sooner. And that's in our many years ago in our teaching biochemistry in Dundee, the professor of biochemistry was a great enthusiast for education. Now, he was a really international biochemist, and he had developed much more a self-learning laboratory. But and there were about 8 different modules in the biochemistry course, and students went through these. It was self-learning, and the self-learning laboratory, and students went through these at their own rate. And when they're ready, there's a big on the board. I've got a photograph. I don't know whether I showed it in one of my slides or not. A big photograph when we talk about assessment. Students could say, book an assessment session, and they say, well, I've now feel I've mastered what was expected of me in this first module or the second module, and I now want to be assessed on it. And they could ask to be assessed in that module. And if they were past the module, then they could go on to the next module. so they go through the course at their own rate. The question, of course, what they do if they master the whole course more quickly than other students. What do they do at the end? Do they just have a holiday then and take it easy? Or do they learn additional things about that subject? Or is there other options of electives available for them? And if these then, can they get some more certificates or badges? I think we're going to see much more. We'll talk about this when we come to the assessment, this notion of certification for micro-credentialing. It's one suggested for the, we come back to the surgery, for example. So all we take suggested for surgeons. What we don't need to know is a surgeon's complete everything. We need to know what procedures he's been competent able to do. So he needs to be credentialed in all of these issues. So if the students in the time at the end, they get these additional micro-credential certificates for additional competencies that might not be part of the core program. So it opens up that sort of discussion. So there's all sorts of possibilities for the student who does go through the course more quickly. In the original work on time-based curriculum, of course, it was in Toronto in orthopedic surgery, where they found that the traditional 3-year surgery course training trainee surgeons in orthopedics, the argument was that that wasn't necessary. Some trainees needed longer, maybe because of family or other reasons, and some needed 4 years to do the course. But some could complete all the training was necessary for an orthopedic surgeon in 2 years. And all this, they went into practice earlier and started working as an trained orthopedic surgeon earlier if they were practiced. And in terms of the pathology training, what was looked at in Australia, I don't know what happened eventually, but if students went through the undergraduate program and did additional electives in pathology, during the undergraduate program, then when they came to postgraduate training as a pathologist, they could complete that in less time. And I think one of the things that I always worry about is the length of postgraduate training. 13 years to train someone from undergraduate to postgraduate to specialty training. Do you really need 13? Well, it's another different argument. We'll come back to another day maybe. Do you really need that amount of time, and how can we speed it up? And I think one question with an outcome-based approach, can you speed up some stage of the training that let us complete training more quickly? That's a hugely challenging thought.
We can individualize training, we can individualize learning, but can we individualize assessment as well for each and every student? As you can say that we can shrink the time of their course program as a whole. We can lengthen up and we can shrink it up. So if a program duration, actual duration is like 5 years, so can we shrink it up to 4 years or 4.5 or 3.5 by taking early exams, assessments of students?
Yeah.
Can it be done?
I think we can. I mean, I think in the biochemistry example, students just said when they wanted to be assessed and they sat an individual exam for them at that stage. The Gleason, who worked with me on the OSCE and was a physician in Ireland, he ran OSCE stations for his students in the ward in Ireland, in Dublin. And when a student felt they were ready to have mastered an area of competence in terms of whether it was cardiovascular examination or whatever, they would say they were ready, and he'd take them through some OSCE stations and test them out that had achieved the competence or not. So these are, I'm very clear that these are different areas, and this is one of the most controversial issues, but I think it's one of the most important issues to avoid this notion of the medical course being a sort of magical mystery tour, to quote the Beatles song, that our students are going through, that we really have to have a planned program And one of the bases of a planned program is we know where they're going, and that's setting the outcomes. So I think it's getting that basic principle across to our colleagues, to our teachers, and students agreeing with it as well. Are there any last minute quick questions anyone wants to feel that they'll be burning if they haven't had a chance to raise something else?
Ricky, do you want to come in with your question that you posted?
Yeah, just asking if you know if individualized education is going on somewhere here in the world. I haven't heard about it, but it's very, very interesting indeed. If someone could go through just in 4 years, but someone has to take it for 6 years maybe, so we can fill on with something else for the people who's going on very quickly, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of examples of bits of the course, like I mentioned, the biochemistry course, but the question of whether you're asking, well, the whole course, whether you can shorten the whole course. And there is, in fact, I think the best example of that is in pediatrics in the States, where they've demonstrated that if the students complete the course as a student, they can do it more quickly, and they'll qualify a year earlier and start as a junior doctor a year earlier if they complete the program. So that is, and the preliminary result, that's been going now for a couple of years, and the preliminary results look at that as these junior doctors who completed the course a year quicker is just as effective. So it's, I think there is increasing body of evidence that this can be made to work. Anyway, can we please let's if there are, I'm conscious this is a big topic. We've raced through it, and we spent a lot of time. But glad we did, because I feel I know you a lot better. So I'm glad we spent some of the time getting to know each other. We don't need to do that the next time. But please, if there's still issues in relation to outcome-based education you wanted us to discuss, let's spend a little bit of the time at the next session, also looking at outcome-based education as well. If there are issues you feel, having thought about it further, because this is a key, difficult, but a key topic that we must get right. If you want to discuss further, have your own strong views on something, please let us know, and we'll spend a little time at the beginning the next time, but also what you want to think about moving on to the next module of curriculum planning. Of course, outcome-based education is one of the outcome-based education, the curriculum planning, in the SPICES model, the last S in the SPICES model is, should we have a systematic or an opportunistic program? And it really was, I only added that at the last minute, that S. I'd SPICE to begin with, and I thought it'd be better SPICES rather than SPICE as a model, and put in that systematic. But when I wrote it, I didn't think it was all that important. Now, I think of all these continua in the curriculum, that probably is the most important continuum. Where do you want to be on that continuum between systematic at one end, where we know what's doing, and that is outcome-based education, where we know what the expected outcomes are, and we have a responsibility as teachers for making sure our students will achieve these outcomes. Is our contract with students. You'll work to get it, we'll help you do it. That's our contract. At the other end, it's just opportunistic, that whatever you'll see, whatever patients are in the ward at this time, or the lecturer will talk about what interests them and so on. That where you be on that continuum. So I think that last continuum in the SPICES model is very much about outcome-based education. So we'll come back to the next time as well. So thank you again for joining the course. Thank you for contributing this afternoon, and look forward to discussing things further for our next session together. So all the best in the meantime.
Very
Thank you
exciting.
very much, Professor.
Thank
Goodbye
you.
to you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Professor.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.